Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Empowered Teams podcast. I'm Eric.
I'm Phil.
And I'm Toby. And I'm going to introduce you to the subject of today's podcast, which we've just been laughing about before we came on here, which is about unlocking your sixth teammate, which is a bit of a Zen koan, a bit of a Zen enigma for this podcast. So where to begin? One of the things that we've done over the last couple of weeks is we've made a partnership with a company in the UK called Eden Smith, which is specializes in consultancy, training, and recruitment in the data industry, and also in particular where it's centered around, but not just Eden Smith, but other companies around the concept of data literacy and data fluency. And perhaps, Phil, just to stop you having your cup of tea there, you'd like to introduce the subject of data literacy and data fluency.
Yeah, certainly. So just briefly, my background, I've been the Chief Data Officer now for a number of years. There was a gradual move over the last kind of 10 years or so to move into organizations describing themselves as being data-driven. And this saw the birth of Chief Data Officers within companies. Primarily, the goal for that was to make your organization, your business, use data the most efficiently and effective way it possibly can. Yeah? Often what you do, and organizations would describe themselves as data driven, but actually what they really meant was there were some people within their organization that understood and did stuff with data. Traditionally, that was probably your technology teams, and often data and technology went hand in glove, and that's how they whenever you thought about who's going to look after your data and do stuff with your data, you always looked at technology. As CDOs, we realized actually data is a team sport, which we talked about before on the podcast. Actually, it flows throughout your organization, and it is your business that is the ones that really need data. But the problem with your business is you've got to make sure that they understand the data that they're using, consuming, and generating. And that's where this idea around data literacy came in. So, and that was the ability that anyone within an organization, in your business, was comfortable around using data. And I don't mean advanced data analytics and advanced physics or mathematics and statistical modeling and all those concepts. I'm just purely saying that data doesn't look right to me. I should challenge that. And I understand why it's wrong, and I understand why it's important to call this out and point this out. And this is where the concept of data literacy came in, because often within organizations, people would just take what data they were given as gospel, as the truth, without applying any level of curiosity or their own intellect to it to actually validate that that was correct. Within, and I've said this before around, and it doesn't matter what type of business you're in. You could be selling T-shirts or nuclear fusion, nuclear fusion even. If you're selling T-shirts and the customer email address is wrong, for instance, you haven't got a .com at the end of it, it says .curve or something. It's like, challenge it. Say, I think that's wrong. Yeah, and primarily that's what we're talking about when we talk about data literacy. And we'll come on now to, and I think this leads really nicely into why then data and technology becomes your additional team member. And this is where the evolution of this concept is going to come to, where actually the advancements that we're seeing now in data and technology, and AI is getting a lot of traction now, is the ability for people to be able to access all this information very easily. They can simply go into a chat and say, give me this information, and you've got it. And then to use that as part of your wider team that you're working in. Not to see technology as something that others do to you, but something that you embrace, you use, you feel confident with, you feel familiar with. And that, my friends, I think is where we'll be the future, and the evolution of data literacy will take us.
So is it right then saying that when we talk about data literacy, that's like the basic skills, and sometimes it gets a bit of a bad press because it's the basic skills, all right? And it's about upskilling people. Not, you're not, from what I understand, and I'm I'm holding out to you to give the right comment on this, but we're looking at or understanding that formal education providers are not focused on this. This is where employers are taking responsibility for educating their teams in these basic skills, where academies are being developed and people like us jumping on the bandwagon for education. So when we talk about data literacy, that's the foundation. When we talk about data fluency, we're talking about going from white belt to black belt and your ability to be able to I suppose, to understand, analyze, evaluate, assess, solve problems with it. Did I get that right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the focus you've always, from traditional kind of education and university background, there's a lot of hard facts that are being taught. It doesn't matter really what subject you're on. Yeah, it's remembering those kind of hard. I did my background's in politics and economics, and you learn all of the kind of the science that went behind that. So economics is quite a good example of that. Yeah. So you'll have a model. You put A into B into the model, and C comes out, and you say that's what the future of the world's going to look like. So the only thing you ever know about economic modeling is you can guarantee it's wrong. Yeah. I mean, one of the most preeminent economists in the UK said he successfully recognised the last recession, but he called the last 7 wrong. So if each year you say there's going to be a model comes out, there's going to be a recession, you're going to get it one right once. Yeah. Actually, your soft skills, your EQ skills, are the ones that call bullshit on it. Are the ones that actually say, it's a model, it's like an understanding. And that's what I'm talking about, the literacy. It's not really about those hard technical skills, and certainly not in computational mathematics or coding or anything. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking purely about your ability to communicate to other people in your team, to challenge what you're seeing, and kind of have the confidence around doing that. And those skills and working with other people and being in an environment where getting things wrong, challenging, speaking freely are enabled and empowered and recognized as core strengths within teams are the ones that's where you should be aiming for. And the really successful data scientists that I found are the ones that can talk to the business, are the ones that can actually challenge what they've been asked to look at. When I employ data scientists and I work with data scientists, when I ask them a question, I love it when they come back and say, Phil, that's bonkers. Why are you asking me to do that? You're not asking the right question, Phil. You need to be asking this question over here. Yeah.
But it always comes back to that iRobot scene that we talk about, which is why we end up with a 16-mate where Will Smith, is in character and he's talking to the hologram model of the doctor that's now brown bread. It's now dead. And he's asking these questions, and the hologram comes back. You're not asking the right question. And so here's the thing: that ability to ask the right questions, that ability to creatively think, is a soft skill. So one of the things that we see that's embedded in the concept of data literacy and data fluency is soft skills. But while I get this feeling that data literacy feels more macho than saying soft skills. Because where our business really flows from is the development of teamwork and leadership. Most people don't realize, but teamwork, leadership, problem solving, collaboration, cooperation, communication, these are soft skills. And a lot of the times organizations say, okay, but it's just communication skills. Data literacy, just we communicated. Well, you've just instrumentalized the hell out of an incredible set of skills. And actually, the most important skill in the data literacy definition is the soft skill, is the ability to look at a complex problem and analyze it, share your doubts, share your reasoning with your colleagues around you, and move forward.
Exactly. Right? And I always think that data and technology, often the two things come together. That they're not they can be mutually exclusive as well, but often you see the two things sort of talked about together. Is that's always within business seen, in my experience, as something that's done to you. Yeah. So someone else does this technology stuff to you. Yeah. And you're always a victim of the technology.
Yeah.
Rather than looking at the other way around, which is what we're proposing, is that actually that data and technology is part of your team. It's another enabling resource that's there, that's available to you, and you should feel comfortable around it and understand how you use it and how you can harness it in its broader. So I know you mentioned about problem solving. Exactly, it's like, how do you then use the technology as part of your problem solving? And I think there's a lot of mystery that goes around a lot of data and technology, that it's really difficult to understand, and it's for other people to be doing. That's not true. The vast majority, like, I've got 2 young daughters. They know this inside out. It's intuitive to them. Anyone that's familiar with video gaming knows how all of this stuff works. Yeah.
Yep.
There's I think it's something like 60, 70, 80% of the population, certainly generations younger than ours, Toby, are completely familiar with video gaming now. They're really used to this and this fluency in using it. But businesses are way, way, way behind that.
I think what's interesting is that, and maybe Eric, you can talk to this, is about how you begin to see in video games this concept of the sixth teammate. I mean, we call Sank, it means 5. We developed this concept by accident of the sixth teammate, that when you have a team of 5, there's a hidden member, and that this sixth teammate is technology. And then we have, Stefan, who's appeared on one of our other podcasts, and you said, tech is your teammate. It's not your enemy. It's not your competitor, and we've started developing this idea that if you see a team of 5 sitting at the table, right, doing stuff, there's a humanoid robot there working with you to represent this way of technology. You want to talk about that a bit?
No, absolutely.
Within video games, you have that, don't you, Eric?
For sure. I actually sort of to approach this from a specific angle. I was watching a video just yesterday that was talking about how when people design video games, and by design video games, we're not just talking about the technology. We're talking about building virtual environments, building the way you will interact with things, like which buttons you press, how the world communicates things to you, right? One of the things that they have to do is, as complexity grows in the environment, right? Imagine you have a table with 50 things on the table. The more complex it is, the better the game has to be at communicating to the user what can and can't be done. Because if you have a table with 50 things on it, and you can only do one thing, right, which is like, I don't know, pick something up, right? That's one thing. That's pretty easy. If all the things are like big blocks and only one of them shines, that's pretty easy to communicate. But say you can interact with 50 things. You can type on your keyboard. You can pick one thing up. You can point at your screen. Well, then how does the environment tell you what can and can't be done? So what we're talking about here is building data, right? Building information in order to interact better with a human. So really what's happening is they're building a virtual person, almost, a virtual sort of type of it's not a brain, it doesn't think, but it's a social thing that has to interact with the way we function socially. And as systems become more complex, it becomes extremely important for those systems to be able to communicate better with us, and for us to be able to communicate better with them and exchange better with them. So really what you see in gaming is this thing where there's a sort of a relationship, a social relationship between the user and the systems. So what we're talking about when we're talking about data literacy is that this sixth teammate is someone in a sort of abstract sense that you have to learn how to interact with better, and that can, by how it's positioned inside the business, inside the team, become a really effective part of the team, right? If you go back to that
But I
game
think
design
there's,
analogy.
a thing there, isn't it?
Yeah.
That because you used the word abstract, and we were having a laugh just before we came on here about where I'd said I'd been using ChatGPT, and it said, you did really well there, Toby, to do something, and you guys, being regular geeks, fell off your chairs laughing. And this idea of anthropomorphism within
Yeah.
within IT, I think it's both important and not important. I mean, it was I forget, was it a George Clooney film where he falls in love with Siri or something? Where you do project identity onto the various technology tools. So you give it an identity.
It's
As
like
part of the,
shouting at your sat nav because they've kind of told you to go down a blind alley. Like
what the
as if
bloody hell are you talking to
if
me?
your sat nav,
Yeah,
understands
right.
what you're shouting at it, but you do, don't
And
you?
so this idea that it's abstract, while technologically correct, but it's not.
Yeah.
That's where I would start to argue from. I know that all the geeks start having a heart attack when I say this, right? But for a lot of people, let's take it back one, okay? One of the things that we've been working on is our marketing campaign and developing, because now our product set, our workshops now have a data literacy layer on top of our soft skills layer. That's the essence of the game workflow that we've built across the game. And that's what was successful. And then we say the game, we mean a video game. So one of the things that, we've started to learn within these components are these very things, aren't they, Eric?
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's we're getting to the point where the more we look at it, the more we notice that there's sort of a split between people who look at technology and look at data as something to be integrated into the team processes, right? Versus people who don't. And there you can almost see a clear like a schism in the mindset between people who do and people who don't. And so as we're building these programs, as we're building this sort of, okay, how do we train people to think about this? How do we train people to work on this? Well, the first thing I think that's sort of happened is that you have to get people to realize that even though they might think that they know stuff about technology or data, often they don't, or they're not really looking to it they're not looking to use it. They're just like, oh, I'm aware it's there. It's something. It's like, okay, so you're aware that there's technology, that there's data within your company, within your environment, and that it's important. Okay, how do you use that? What do you do with it? What role does it take in your activities, right? And so, Phil, to go back to what you were saying earlier, there's that thing where it's about challenging information. It's about actually looking to the data, and even if it's not something you master very well, it's about saying, well, I'll still look at it, and maybe my point of view will be insightful. So that shift we were identifying is almost, you could almost draw a line between companies that are that use technology as just this system, this like tool, like a keyboard. It's there, you can press keys, cool, okay, that's not my job. And people who say, there's this tech, there's this data, there's this information, it is part of my job, even if my job has nothing to do with the contents of the tech itself. Regardless of that, it is bound to be, to some extent, part of my job. So I have to sort of embrace that, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest challenges I've faced when I've talked to the wider business, is that we are all in the data game.
Yeah.
It's all about, everything that everyone does within the businesses I worked in some ways relates to data within the organization. But there's a lot of people they don't really realize that that's a significant part of their job, but it is. And when organizations talk about being data driven or data literate, those businesses are successful recognize that.
Yeah.
So I've had lots of conversations with businesses about, how do you clean up poor data? Yeah. So I don't trust the data I've got within my organization. It's really rubbish. Yeah. And I'm like, well, don't let the poor data in the first place then. Design your system is a bit like sewage works, isn't it? Do you know what I
As
mean?
geeks
It's
would
like,
say,
don't have a
garbage in,
sewage
garbage
treatment
out.
centre. Try to stop the sewage getting in the first place is the way. And then if everyone in your business understands that actually, I'm taking down a bit of information on here, but actually it's kind of like I understand that it's my responsibility really to make sure that information that I recorded is correct and accurate. And the technology is there to help and enable you to be able to go and do that. And once you sort of understand that, and also when I talk about data fluency and technology, it's kind of being aware of what technology is available to you to help you improve your job.
Yeah.
And I think often people aren't aware of that. The only people that know what technology is available to them are the kind of technology dudes in the department who then go and roll out, here you go, here's Teams or whatever.
But
But they don't.
doesn't that come back to, the point that we were sort of, I didn't perhaps say it well enough before, but that when we were talking about identity before, and part of the marketing thing we were doing was we were creating a slide that split into two. Right, and on the left-hand side, we've got we'd originally started with a picture of the Terminator, the red-eyed machine monster made famous by Arnold Schwarzenegger and Skynet and all the rest of it. Okay, and on the right-hand side, we've got a humanoid robot as part of a team. This is where we've got the six team member. But here we've got identity, and identity comes from soft skills. Right? Our ability to use concepts and make social relationships with these. And while both of you were talking, I was thinking about how the publicity or the media that it's out there is basically fear mongering with the AI, generational AI. But they want to sell news, they want to sell advertising, so they're doing that. Well, at the same time, it's not helped by a lot of the leaders within the industry are also piling in on Skynet type fantasies as well. I'm not quite sure whether
they've created Frankenstein's monster, and now they're like, well, we wanted to put him back in the cupboard now, and you're like, well, hang on,
put the genie back in. Put the genie back in the bottle. But here's the other thing that says, right, which is what we experience, and we now can really see because what we talk a lot about in soft skills is you've got to understand technology. The reason we built the video game was so that you understood technology as well, that you can't operate in today's business world without being able to understand technology. And one of the biggest obstacles that we faced time and time again in the training industry is that why would we use video games? They're bad for you. Look what it does to children. Increases the murder rate in the US, because people use Call of Duty and stuff like that. So there's this total misunderstanding by a certain generation of people that technology is evil. And and not and here we have further evidence of it as the AI uprising. So when we started to try and understand what we were doing here, we changed the picture, and we made it just part of a series of humanoid robots all sitting together. But I was looking at the slides that we'd done, and we'd created a quadrant. Do you guys remember?
Yeah.
And this middle part of the quadrant was data incompetent to data empowered.
Yeah.
Right. And the horizontal side was stagnation to adaptability. But in essence, this was from silos to multi-team. What the middle line was soft skills, teamwork and leadership. to be able to do this. So this top left of the quadrant was technocracy. And what you just described there, Phil, was those that have got a handle on data, but they have no handle on soft skills.
Exactly. Yeah.
Zero. And part of their problem is that they think, well, if I just handle data like the Vulcan in Star Trek, why do we need people?
I think a very typical example of this is if you look at like the websites built by governments. Often there's this sort of this thing where everyone agrees that they make no sense. They aren't designed for the user. They're just sort of, they gave a data set to someone. They gave them sort of this order to make it work. And then you end up with things where nothing makes sense. Even the people who work at the government don't understand how it functions. They're just following sort of a set of technical instructions. And the technology is not part of their process. The technology is just something that they have to integrate, and they have integrated, and that's it, right?
Yeah. I was going, Toby, just going to come back on a point that you made there. One of the things also, I think, around your quadrant and those that are kind of, I can't remember how we describe it, kind of like the data driven or the future ways of working, if you like.
It's in your slide deck.
The not stagnant.
It's in the second slide there. Yeah.
Oh, that's the one. Yeah. So, and the ones that will find them in obsolescence is often because of how companies are structured and organized themselves, where you have often quite a hierarchical structure, which is often male, pale, and stale, as I like to describe them, leadership that's at the top. They are the ones that are the technology ignorant, yeah? They are the ones where the ignorance is driving fear within their organization, but they are the people that make the decisions. They are the purchasing power. They own the training budget. Yeah, they decide on what, ultimately they'll sign off the seat that says what technology you should have in an organization, and then they wonder why they don't. They really struggle to actually be able to unlock technologies to drive their business forward. When actually, throughout the DNA of their organization, they will have people that are absolutely familiar with technology, right? They have no fear of embracing it and how to use it, and they won't sit within your traditional IT departments. They'll be all around your business. You ask how many people in an organization, play video games on a regular basis, are coding, made their own website. There'll be hundreds within a larger, or thousands, if not within a larger organization. And actually, if you started to embrace them and allow them to unlock their creative abilities and genius on your business, then you're going to go leaps and bounds ahead. And they won't have that fear. And this is so your point around that, where that fear, if we all allow ourselves to be led by this fear, then the bad guys will grab hold of AI. Yeah. And those who don't,
not they will, they are.
They are. Yeah. So the answer to that is for everyone on the good side of that, not the dark force. Yeah. So it's us to go get our Luke Skywalker and Ben Kenobi hats on and go, actually, we're going to take this and we're going to do it for good. Right? Yeah. We're gonna control it. The ethics around this, the use around it, we'll start to embrace this and understand it, and then we'll drive in a direction that's going to help society. Using technology as your sixth team member, that is a way to unlock the solutions that we need for the future. But if we don't start to have those skills, those EQ skills, those soft skills, those power skills to enable that, we're going to be stuck. We're just going to be completely obsolete, and then there's just going to be people marching ahead using AI to whichever end that we may not be happy with. And sorry, Tony, whilst I'm on a roll, sorry, Tony, but one other thing I was going to say. One of the things, the problems that we've had, from my experience, is these techocracies like Google, Facebook, Apple to a degree, all of them, is because they realised where the future is lying and they commoditized it. And they're selling it back to us. That's because we weren't keeping up as a society and companies and business at the same level of growth as they were. Those companies, by and large, they had all the people in their businesses that are comfortable, are data literate all the way through their DNA. So they're always tackling all these problems. They're looking with a future eyes. Our job, I think, is what Sonk is all about is raising people to that level as well, so they can do exactly the same within their organisations, which they are capable of doing. Is just being able to unlock that.
But it comes back. I mean, here's an experience that Eric and I had with one of our partners. We did a presentation to the learning and dev teams of a really big, I'm going to not describe it in France, supermarket chain. Okay. And we came in there and we presented Sank and all the rest of it. And then we got the feedback, etc. And basically the L&D people had only ever been used to serious games, which nobody in their right mind would ever play. You want to shoot yourself, you want to play this stuff, the most boring, useless stuff. Didn't even make Second Life look exciting, and that really requires some work as well. So here, what was the feedback? Oh, we couldn't possibly take this to the financial director and the board directors. And we were like, why? Because it's a video game, and they couldn't cope with it. I said, but, yeah, I know, but we have to be careful about, what's the right thing. They don't think much of video games and stuff. So there's this thing, right, where technology is the domain of the CIO.
Yep.
I mean, you'd be lucky if you've got CDOs in some of these companies. The CEO deals with that, right? And in the learning department, it's separate. But we use technology and learning because we have LMS systems which don't work. And there are no LMS systems that work that increase revenue results. I mean, all you got to do is take a vote of people using them, and most of the discussions from LinkedIn and all the rest of it about how to make LMS systems work, but they don't. It's just it's a way of spending.
In our grid, from my experience, the HR departments are in that obsolete bit. Yeah, because actually they've probably got the soft skills. They understand that kind of coaching. Although I would argue it's all about the individual and not the team. But they're technology illiterate, which actually most of these organisations, everyone uses a laptop, or a PC or Windows or whatever it is. They're all using technology. But you speak to the IT people, bless them, they're the least likely in an organisation to embrace technology.
At least likely to embrace.
Actually, pretty much most businesses are technology businesses.
We were just having what was it? We were having a conversation last week, wasn't it? And it was with somebody was trying to reassure me. Yeah, don't worry, you'll be talking to the. It was where there's a potential client coming up, all right, and for 300 to train 300 people on a 1-day course. And I'm saying, that's interesting. And he said, and I said, what age are they, and have they ever played video games? And our partner said, yeah, but don't worry, they come from an IT company. I said, well, it's almost cast guarantee. It's a cast iron guarantee. They won't have a clue what we're talking about if they come from an IT company, right? Because they won't understand video games.
They'll have a few interns that do, and that's it.
They just won't. Yeah, right. And particularly, whether they work in security.
Just to give people a bit, so I'll probably try and get the diagram we're talking about into our into the description of this.
Well, it's two of them, remember?
Yeah, but just to give people a bit of an idea, what we're really talking about here is there's this wave of technology coming. There's this wave of everything becoming technology oriented. AI is probably going to change a lot of things. And basically, if you don't do anything, you're going to be in permacrisis. Everything's going to be a mess, and you're going to get, you're going to get taken over by smaller, more agile, disruptive companies that embrace technology. So what happens is there are these two axes, and fear is holding people back, right? So you've got this thing where you can continue working in silos, continue working with a very sort of, vertical, everyone gives the orders mindset, and not be agile, not let people actually, take responsibility for the data, take responsibility for the technology. And if you do that, even if you embrace technology, you're going to be a technocracy. You're going to be a slow-moving actor, and you're still going to get overtaken. And on the other hand, if you're great, you get really agile. Everyone's really working on their soft skills. Everyone's working as a team and as teams, right? Teams of teams, multi teams. Great, but technology's not your thing. Everyone's afraid of it. You don't push people to just explore it, get interested in it, and embrace it, and become responsible for it. Then you're going to become obsolete because someone with the technology is going to come and just do it better than you. So what you have to do is you have to do both. You have to both get the technology and get the soft skills. And by doing that, and by making them one and the same, by making it so that working with the technology is part of the soft skills, having the soft skills is part of your ability to use the technology, then and only then, and that's why we talk about this sixth teammate, right? Then and only then, once you have technology as your team member, you're going to be able to thrive. You're going to be able to push past the barrier of that, oncoming crisis and thrive.
I suppose, Eric, what you've done a really good description of it, and I think you're right there. It's like you said before, Phil, that the obsolescence side of the quadrant, the bottom right. Okay, so it is where because we're trying to do this as a Gartner slide as well, where we're going to put our competitors within there. All right, and so the bottom right is where you get like individual coaching, you get corporate coaching, and the top left is where you've got e-learning and LMS systems, so technology driven stuff, etc. But even as you made the point that HR organizations, you would think, would understand soft skills. And I would say they don't. And that's me really being tough on those guys out there. Because HR organizations in themselves are faced with a major problem, which is they're misunderstood, or they don't see that they have a vital role within organizations. And primarily because they're stuck between a rock and a hard place generally, because the what did you call it, pale male and something stale
pale
group
male
of
and
people.
stale, that's basically
Right,
how I describe corporate boards that I've worked for.
Right, well, they're the blockage, right? Because even when we talk about this combination of what we're talking about now for the sixth teammate is data literacy plus soft skills, that people think soft skills is about being nice.
Yeah, that's true.
Even HR organizations are faced with an issue. So, for example, we know there's a big telecoms company that's in France that really says, yes, we want to take on board soft skills. We see these are the skills the company's going to need in the future. We're going to have everybody do a training course on this. And suddenly you think, yeah, they're going to be training on this regularly for the next couple of years. We're going to give everybody the opportunity to do 2 days training in the whole year for it. That's such a misunderstanding of the development of a set of skills. How can you learn a skill in 2 days? Can I learn to dance in 2 days? Can I be a karate master in 2 days? Can I be a top F1 Grand Prix driver in 2 days? No. Well, how am I going to learn soft skills in 2 days? It's like, it's a joke.
Because you do an LMS course, and then at the end, it'll ask you a questionnaire. And if you're like me, you'll just jump straight to the questionnaire at the end and hope you get your 70% pass mark at the end of it without having to watch all the boring videos.
And
90% of people do.
And you ask the person next to you who's already done it what they answered. That way you get a good grade. Isn't that how it works? It's basically back to school.
Right. And so what we're talking about here is that the soft skill is team. So the team is no longer 5 people in a room, all right, or 5 people somewhere, and you just call it team, and you never train them how to operate in a team. What we're talking about are that these have empowered teamwork skills that you can't get in a half-day course once a year. You really need to bring them together, and they need to understand how to use technology and how to use it. And it's not just a tool, right? It is a team member, right? That is brought together with how do I set goals? How do I solve problems? How do I create? How do I collaborate? How do I communicate? How do I execute? How do I iterate plans? And when you list them out like that, people look at you like you've gone crazy. Because the key thing to understand is, what is the skills gap? That's why we've created the product. It enables you to see, right, where are you? Are you a white belt or are you a black belt in these skills? And by the way, we mean technology, data literacy, all right, and the soft skills. Because you can't have one without the other. They're useless. They're irrelevant, right? If you've got soft skills and you haven't got the data literacy skills, you can't switch on a PS4, you can't operate in a 3D environment, you can't understand what you're looking at, then it's a fail.
Yeah. One thing you mentioned there was about the teams. And in my experience of this, pretty much 95% of the time, there have been a couple of, is when I was at the level where I had, I was managing big programs, and I'd have agile scrum teams below. Yeah. All the time that I would have feedback was the team's not getting on, the team's not working together very well. They've got a couple of members within the team that are, aren't following the right pattern. They're not driving at the same speed. You'd have one element of the team would be going off 110 miles an hour, other ones at snail pace. Yeah. All is actually what you find is they're not a team. They are individuals thrown into a room into a team, and then we call them a team. No one's trained them. No one has said, you used a Formula One example, like the car's coming to the pit stop, right? And you've got all of the skills that are around there. So the guy that lifts the jack, the guy that takes the tire, they've all got their little jobs, yeah? In our world, they're not told who to work goes first, second, third, fourth, last, Don't do that because I haven't done the bolts yet on the wheel. None of that conversation happens. They're just all thrown into a room and then just off you go. Then come back and solve it. It's just it is unbelievable how
it's oxymoron teamwork in
totally. And this is your most expensive asset you have as an organisation, and you're not training them how to work collectively together as a team. Yeah, and like you're saying, all of those ideas around having soft skills and stuff. If you don't know, you have people with different, you have your extroverts, your introverts, you have your people that are confident, the people that are quieter but know a lot of stuff. All of those kind of personality traits need to be accounted for within a team. How are you going to communicate properly? All of these things. No, it's not trained. You just don't. You're not shown, and you often don't get a good example or good leadership around what you're supposed to do about it. And don't get me on to when you've got the kind of team manager that's just they're the most experienced one or the longest serving, so therefore you give them the name badge manager and just tell them to go and manage. Yeah,
it's catastrophic actually, and that's why let's talk about what we've created here. Is that we have a video game that we're now building, and we're going to do a podcast. I think that we should do that this week, Eric, a podcast on the new game that we're building as well, and building up to when we're launching it in September, is that what we see time and time again is that when teams come in to play the video game, they fail. But here's two things, right? They fail, all right? But one of the things that I think that is never really taken account for by the chaps that sit at the top in organizations is the concept that people can grow.
Exactly.
All right. That not only they can grow past any point that you give them the limitations to. You just said, imagine if you actually unlocked all of the skills and abilities, the latent skills and abilities, but it's not so much latent, but the ones that are hidden within the organization, because you treat them like parts of a machine. What happens if I really like Gartner for some of the things that they're talking about. I like Gartner because it positions the gap out there in the world that says that the level of engagement that organizations actually exist with is terrible. It's catastrophic, all right? But that if you want to try to rectify this, you have to think of a growth mindset and shared purpose. How many organizations can really say that they share their purpose with their employees and that they're part of a team? We have to start thinking like sports teams, elite
Totally agree.
sports teams, and bringing people together in such a way that they literally collaborate with you all the way. The decision making is not just taken by the holy few at the top, because my God, just look at how often they're getting that wrong. I mean, COVID is the example of how catastrophic hierarchical organizations function, in every area and every domain. It's only by the grace of God, that there are some amazing scientists out there working in teams, that we've managed to get to a position where we are now, where we're relatively free, where we're the other side of something that was really terrible. Teamwork is the essence of you cannot have teamwork without data. It doesn't make sense. It's just it's stupid.
Yeah, I really like, if we took it back to the one thing I like is you take it back to the gameplay, to the Sonic game. And I don't want to give away too much because the millions that are listening to this podcast are going to clearly want to play the game after hearing us talk there. There's one of the avatars, one of the characters we create is an acrobat, and the first stage of that is they get sort of, if you like, detached from the rest of the team. They kind of off on their own little mission. Yeah, but then everyone forgets about this poor acrobat that's just sat up there. They're like, "What am I supposed to be doing?" Like running around. They have they're integral to the game and integral to the solution. But the beginning part of the beginning of the game, sort of less so. But it's fascinating how many times I've been involved in a team and stuff, and I'm just sat there, and then I suddenly discover that the rest of the team have been meeting every morning and having conversations. They never bothered to invite me, and I got no idea this is going on, or they've made some decision along the line and haven't told anybody else. And it's fascinating how the game brings this out really, really quickly, and because it kind of stresses you in a level where your innate kind of your innate skills or whatever, or your innate behaviors is probably a better way, sort of come out. And it's kind of quite fascinating. Some people will be that about with shouting, "What about me? I want to be involved." Others will just sit there and just say, "Well, I'm just going to wait until someone tells me to do something."
To the point where we've had people stand up and leave, and no one noticed for over 40 minutes because they just literally do not pay attention to what their team is doing as a whole, right?
And you take that as a slice. Actually, I mean, it's a very powerful tool to look at how organisations, because you could take that at an organisational level and see how silos work, where whole silos of your organisation aren't talked to. Yeah. Yeah. How often is the IT service desk involved in designing the culture strategy for an organisation? I bet there isn't anyone out there that's had the IT service desk team involved in designing what the cultural strategy for the organisation should be. But everyone in the organisation interacts with the IT service desk.
Have you switched it off and on?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this isn't working.
This is the internet. Here's the thing I was just thinking about. Sorry, Eric.
No, I was just going to say, to add to that example, look at how we interact these days. Half of our human interactions are at least partially made through social media. So having IT involved in your human
I would even
strategy,
say more than half,
should be the first place to go, right?
Exactly, yeah.
But let me bring it sort of to a close, guys, right? Because here's the thing that there's an advert, I think, for going to London that's doing the rounds on French cinema, and it's the ostrich that's looking at, I don't know if you guys have seen it. The ostrich is looking and he looks down and it has a line.
In a museum. It says,
"Do not cross this line."
Yeah.
And it makes, which is in a museum, but actually in the UK, if you travel on a tube, it's beware of the line. Do not cross the line. It's almost, when you step out the door, it's stepping in, because it's, because we managed to design it so there's a hole. So you can break your leg, to do that. But do you remember when Jez and the guys were playing the game, Jez is the CEO of Eden Smith, or playing a game, and Jez made this. He drew this box like this, and I thought it was quite powerful what he did like that. And he said, "We're all inside this box." Because we think, oh, is it okay if we do this?
Yeah.
Are we breaking the rules if we do this? And I wanted to do a podcast on one, do not cross the line. Because that's embedded, right, implicitly in organizations. Because if you cross this line, you're in trouble. And where do you learn this? You learn this at school. In really the structure of teamwork and the ways of dealing with authority in our organizations, both politically and corporate, are based on a classroom. They're not based. If you go and work in the military and you work in special forces, all that's eradicated. Yeah. You can't function like that. You have to learn to throw all of that out. You have to learn to communicate, collaborate, move together in very different ways to the school model, which is hierarchical, expert-driven. What we're talking about, what you just said before, Phil, is that everybody brings to the table some form of expertise. And in particular, we're not making use of it. It's crazy how much lost potential there is in an organization if you only depend on the top 5 people in an organization who know nothing about the world, who are probably 90% ignorant of what's happening out there, which is why they're in permacrisis. Permacrisis, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have a real passion for this, that the solving the problems that you face as an organization or a business, or developing the next potential for your organization or business, the solution is there within your organization. Guaranteed. Yeah. You just haven't been able to release that creativity, that potential within your organization because of the very way that you are structured, the very way that you people within your organization interact and work together. Yeah, we're moving much more now to multi-mindset, so multi-skill sets within people, but we still have this very narrow view of this is what you do as a job. Yeah. So you can't, as you said, you can't step out of your line, yeah? So I can't be the HR person and the IT person, yeah? I can't be the IT person and the finance manager, yeah? Or, whatever combination you want to make of it. But actually now, it's so diversified, the people with knowledge and skills that you obtain and you can do and you can behave. And when you're within a team, actually you can take on a function of a multitude of roles within that team to solve a problem.
Absolutely. And that's the same thing if you play in a multiplayer video game. I mean, if you play World of Warcraft and you're part of a 40-person team doing a raid, all right, you better know what your colleagues can do. Otherwise, it's a fail.
Yeah.
All right. So, I'm going to sort of bring things to close because done really well today, and there's a lot, you can see there's a lot more that we can talk about, and I hope we bring it up on the next thing. But this idea of the 6 teammate, I hope those that have been listening to, we've managed to get this concept and this principle across. The data literacy and soft skills, all right, actually create, that creates an identity in your team. All right, the technology is not your enemy; it is your friend, and it is an asset. Right, and it's something that part of your training programs, part of developing a growth mindset, part of sharing purpose and working together is something that we're really focused on. So I'd like to say thank you to Phil. I'd like to say thank you to Eric. All right, and if you actually liked what we do, then please press like below. That really helps us. And if you really like this, then please, and you wanna know more about what we're doing, please press subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.
Ciao.